have the humility to understand that you're not perfect, that you can learn something new, and if you're stuck in a rut, that's just a season of life. And instead of saying, oh, woe me, say, what is this moment in my life teaching me? What am I going to learn from this struggle?
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Think of Me podcast, where I'm really excited to have Kyle Goodknight with us. Kyle is the mastermind, the Wizard of Oz, the tech guru, the fire putter outer, the first responder to Everything podcast since last November. And when we got together and I said yes to launching, and Kyle's service and dedication to his work and to his clients is just next level in getting this out there, as I say, in messaging, but also just from a human support side of things. There's been one thing after another, and without Kyle, the stress levels would have been even twice as high. So I just, in introducing him, really want to let our friends listening know the kind of person that Kyle is in that regard. And I hope he might share some of his thoughts, experience, story in and around why he became a first responder, but also in podcast launching. And I know some of his original messaging in how he shares mental health aspects for first responders too. So with all that said, I'll hand over to Kyle to say hi. And Kyle, as I say, just really grateful that you're here and sharing your story and your service for our friends and for anyone else who maybe needs to hear it.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren. I appreciate you having me on the Thinking of Me podcast here. I've just as much gratitude as you put out towards me for the things that we've worked with since November. I put just as much out to you because you've been an inspiration for me as a client, that I have been able to wholeheartedly put myself and my understanding and my sometimes my thinking cap on to help you. Because that's all I want to make sure that I do for my clients, is that I serve them. And that kind of goes back to my first responder world. I'm a servant at heart. I've been in the healthcare field for almost 30 years. So 3 decades, I'm like right under 3 decades of being in hospital settings first. I was in the hospital settings for about 10 years. And then I became a paramedic and did them both for a little bit, and then jumped ship and went to only being a paramedic. And then once in a while, I came back to respiratory therapy. That's what I originally was a respiratory therapist in the hospital setting. So I became a voiceover actor about 8 years ago. Kind of as a first responder, you have a little bit of downtime when it comes to your days off. And you need to find something else to do other than plug yourself back into the healthcare field for your secondary job. Most of us first responders have multiple jobs. We don't get paid that well, so we have to have a second job, and we have the time. I mean, I work a 24-hour shift, and what that means is I go to work for 24 hours, and then I'm off for 48, and then I go back for 24. So it's every third day. So if you do that math, that's about 121 days a year that I'm supposed to be on the schedule. I can take vacations and, what have you, of course. So it's roughly around 120 days a year that I'm on duty, minus overtime, right? So you have plenty of time to do something else, and most of us do something else. I've been a contractor before. I've swung a hammer for a living or for a part-time living. I've went back to the hospital and worked at the hospital. But you mentioned something about mental health. One of the worst things we can do as first responders is have a secondary job as another traumatic, something where you see trauma and bad things. It's not good for our mental health to double or triple that up. And so many of us do that because we don't have other skill sets. So one thing I learned early on from my parents, both my mother and my father, they were both jack of all trades and master of many. My dad was an incredible businessman. He was an incredible contractor. He was he actually went out and sold high-level microscopes for a while. I remember when I was in high school, he sold like high-end microscopes to doctors' offices. And I'm like, okay, well, how does someone get into that? And then he could turn around and build a house for you. So, and my mom was and I say was, my mom passed away 25 years ago. But when she was in her prime, she was the only female in a male-dominated field of compressed gas cylinders. She would go all around the world and purchase and reconfigure compressed gas cylinders like oxygen or acetylene, big metal cylinders that give us gas in the compressed form. She would go to Germany and buy up lots of that and bring it back, and plus then she became a realtor, and then they started owning properties, and then I started working with my dad when I was in high school to fix those properties. And I just learned from a young age that you don't only have to have one job. You can do many things if you have the time. So when I became a paramedic and I went full time and I worked 24 hours and off for 2 days afterwards, so on 24, off 48, I had to do something to fill my time. And I swung a hammer for a while. I still do a little bit. I've got one job I'm doing right now for a friend of mine that I'm still remodeling their basement, but I've got all winter to do it because they moved to Florida for the winter. So I've got like a nice loose timeline for that. But other than that, 8 years ago, I became a voiceover actor. That led me to making intros and outros for people's podcasts. That led me to that person wanted me to be a co-host on his podcast and then produce his podcast. And that's where I started learning production and all the different things that podcasts bring you, and YouTube and all the different Spotify's and Apple and all the different places. And then eventually got turned on to a podcast mentoring group. And that's how I started. I kind of pivoted from voiceover. Don't get me wrong, I still do that once in a while. I'm in negotiation right now to do a book. But my main side gig now is helping people like yourself use their podcast to leverage it to grow their business and grow and serve the community you want to serve that you want to. So that's me in a nutshell. That took, 6 minutes? I'm looking at the timer.
I mean, it's a jam-packed life, Kyle. It'd take as much time in sharing that, because I didn't actually realize half of that. I didn't realize like all the different, as you say, jack and trades that have been part of your story and up to now. And I love that, like with the role model of your parents, both your dad and your mom. And again, sorry that she's passed that length of time for you, and that too, but that her legacy and her work ethic, and obviously her rearing, we'd say that here in Ireland, the rearing side of it, lives in and through you, and now lives through your work. And, in kind of seeing that, you remind me at times of my granddad, actually, where he was the same. He worked 3 different jobs, when my mum and my uncle were young, and my granny was staying at home then after her second child to rear the family as such, but still doing all the odd bits for everybody else and neighbours and all that kind of thing. And yeah, that kind of, I suppose, that sense of provider, and that for yourself and for your family. And I know you actually mentioned that you built, to me at one point, that you built your first home, and that's a huge achievement.
Yeah, well, we had so when I got married, when we were engaged, we went into contract on a brand new build, and just the timing, or like 1989-ish. I got married in 2000. It was, kind of the way that people did starter homes back then in the neighborhood we found. And, honestly, it wasn't as much pressure on me because I had a full-time job. My wife at the time was in school, though, nursing school, trying to pass her boards and all that stuff. And then she has this responsibility of this house that's not even, that she's on the books for, but we're not married. So it was very stressful for her. And that showed very much so in the first couple of weeks of our marriage. She decided that she didn't want to be married anymore and started to leave. And that was the first time that I kind of like, hold on a minute, what's going on? And she's walking up the steps. I turn around, I sit her down, and I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, I can't be married. I can't be married. I'm like, okay, listen, let's look at your last 30 days. 30 days. I said, you graduated from nursing school. You took your nursing degree, your exam. You started a new job in nursing. You got married. You bought a house with me that now you have all this responsibility for. And you know, your uncle passed away on our honeymoon who filmed our wedding. I'm like, so you've got 6 major life changes that happened to you in 30 days that most people would have a problem with if it only had one of them. And she was like, oh, that's very okay. That makes a lot more sense why I'm so stressed. And so like early on, I think that, but without knowing what I know now, looking back 25 years, I was already very understanding of our mental health in healthcare and how it affects not just us, but our lives and our families. So yeah, it was one of those things where we're having that, that clarity in the way that my parents, they never shied away from hard conversations. I've had a lot of hard conversations with my parents. I'm the youngest of 4. I watched my brother run away when he was 15. I watched my sister overdose when I was 10. So my family had a little bit different way to approach things that were more, hey, this is what's going on, and here's why we're so stressed and why things may be a problem right now. Let's work the problem. Let's not run away from the problem. And that's basically how I've, lived my life, not only in my career changes. I didn't mention earlier, I was also in medical sales for 9 years while I was a paramedic. So I would get off of the paramedic in my free time. I would go and travel the state and sell medical products that I used and I knew how to use, both respiratory and EMS supplies. So I've always done something else other than my own job. It was always a big joke of what's Kyle's new job nowadays, and it was, I don't know if it's my personality, my ADHD, seeing the history of my family have different types of jobs and always having, more than one iron in the fire, that it's just normal for me. I don't know. I hurt my fingers on a table saw one time, and that knocked me out of all my jobs except for voiceover. And I don't even think I may not even been a voiceover actor then, but I spiraled. I did not do well for those 3 months. And by the end of those 3 months, I was in a funk, a bad funk, like depression. And I'm not a depressive type of person. So that there proved to me that I have to serve to understand that that's who I am and to accept who I am in my own skin.
I love that, Kyle. And I really resonate with that because so you reached out to me through a joint Facebook community where overachievers and successful like-minded friends, are together and are part of a community of learning as such, and through the software and through the company and that kind of thing. And I was sharing at the time the start of one of my changes, and one thing that was kind of like coming up for me there, and when you're sharing like that about with, as a newlywed and having to face that with somebody else, I know what that's like in the sense of both witnessing a partner and then you yourself maybe going through a series of changes at one time. And when you share there, like, when suddenly there's an injury or there's something that literally stops you from working in some way, that kind of moment of, what am I doing right now? And it does bring you kind of inward. It does bring you into, as you say, like, what am I meant to do? And I suppose I'm kind of curious, like, is there any area of the work you've done, either in the past or now, that you have enjoyed or do enjoy the most?
Gosh, it's just so that's such a loaded question because.
Sorry, throw it on you. I did say I'd throw it in.
No, that's okay. It's so loaded because I've had the jobs I don't like, and I've had and it's my wife will, and I bring up her a lot because she helps. If it wasn't for my wife, I wouldn't be where I am personally. I almost lost her another time in a possible divorce. I came home one time from work and she's like, I'm done. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, I'm out. And I'm like, whoa, this is a blindside. Well, through that 2-year process, I learned a lot about myself and how I was treating others back then. Not only her, but coworkers, kids, not abusive or anything like that, but just I wasn't all in on any of it. And she helped me understand what it really meant to be who I need to be, right? And one of the things that she tells me is she's like, she goes, I've never met anybody like you who enjoys everything you do. Like, you look forward to going to work. I hate going to work, she says. She's like, I'd rather not work. And I'm like, yeah, I'd like to go to work, like I like my job. I worked the last 36 hours and I've had a crazy 36 hours and I'm still kind of like on a high from it, right? I help people. I was in the position to help people when we had something major happen here in our city. And I never got called to do it because, thank God, everything got wrapped up before it was my turn. Or for my truck's turn, but we had a major incident where we had to respond as mutual aid to whole nother city. And you're there and you're in the moment and, you're thinking through your protocols and what you're going to do and your safety stuff. And it's one of those things. We got cleared and then it was like, well, at least we were there. At least we were trained. At least we were ready to do what our job did. And that's where I thrive. So I don't want mayhem. I'd rather go to work and do nothing all day because that means nobody's getting hurt and nobody's injured and nobody's sick. But that's not the real world, right? So, but on the other hand, I just don't have those days where I'm like, I can't stand this. If I ever have in other jobs, I have quickly learned that, okay, I need to pivot and do something else. So I had a job one time where I left the medical industry altogether and started developing medical supplies. And it was in a corporate world, supposedly 9 to 5, but I was putting a lot more hours in than that. And that's when I started having anxiety, chest pain. And I'm like, wait a second, what is going on with me? I can perform an entire cardiac arrest and be cool as a cucumber, but I'm stuck in this other environment where I'm neglecting my family even more. At one point in time when I finally when I told my wife that I put my 2 weeks in at that job, she goes, that's probably the best thing that you've ever done. You were days away from another ultimatum. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, I missed, we fixed our marriage for about 2 years. It took us to get it right, to get the ship right, about 12 years in. And then probably, when was that? It was probably 5 years later, I had this other job for a little while. And I started slipping back into this, not Kyle. and she, when I called and told her that I put my 2 weeks in, she's like, that's really good that you did that. And she was happy for me. And I'm like, it's going to be a struggle because I left those other jobs that were making ends meet, took this one job that made ends meet, and now I don't have those other jobs and I've got to go find another job. And she's like, that's okay. She goes, I know you can. And it was like, okay, that's it. There's the confidence that it's surprising sometimes just the little things when it comes to like just a little bit of support, a little bit of respect, how much that increases someone's, what's the word I'm looking for? It increases their, when you're confident, it increases someone's confidence. Oh, hold on, more coffee.
Cheers to that. No, I hear you, Kyle. And, my granny would always have the saying of like, behind every good man is a better woman. And I question that at times, but it's so true. No,
I do think there's a lot of work that goes into us.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing of there's a play on at the minute with the drama group, and it's the Ubu trilogy, but I had never seen it or heard of it before. But it's kind of like a farcical parody of a combination of the Shakespeare's, and you can just like the one character I can see so clearly in like Ma Ubu is meant to be a parody of Lady Macbeth, and I was like, yeah, it's like a crazy woman whispering into a man's ear with power. Of course, the whole world goes to chaos, you know. It was kind of, you know, when you kind of see that, and then when you see the opposite, like through, and I'd be, as you know, kind of big Potter fan, and any friends listening, you know, I share that a lot. But you know, in kind of making sense of where, you know, that the blood through Harry's veins kind of thing. So without going like too deep into like stories and things like that, like there is a need for both. Like you definitely see that, and Tony Robbins and Sage Robbins are great in kind of conveying that. And you know, he'd always kind of say that, you know, sometimes she'd test him, you know, and that makes him a better man, you know, in like those moments of kind of nearly like what you shared in your marriage story there, of like those moments of I'm done, or that, you know, where it's like he says that it's helped him grow and become the man that he is, and that too. So yeah, in kind of full circle of that, Kyle, I suppose, and with the work, and with your marriage, and with your family, and with all things, as a first responder, and in seeing some of those events, you mentioned that too. What are kind of some of the things you found over the years that bring you back to center? You know, like you recognize there that there was a job that was just kind of bringing out the wrong side of you, that, like, as you said, like not Kyle. Like, yeah, I suppose either what brings that awareness back for you, or what kind of tools do you use that kind of keep you grounded when it does get stressy?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lauren, because it's different now than it used to be. You know, at one point in time in my life, it was video games and drinking beer. You know, not to the level of alcoholism, but I'd sit home at night and play my video games and have a couple of daddy pops. That's what we called them back then. You know, I'm at home. I'm not running around on the town or, you know, getting into mayhem. But it was like, and then I realized, you know, that's not, and I started gaining weight because you know, and I started just that look in the mirror, that time when you're just like, you know, I don't really like this version of myself. And I can change it. I'm not in a rut. I can, you know, I can change what I'm doing. So like that point in time, I realized that I needed, I'm the type of person that when I come into a room with a bunch of people, it doesn't bring me down. It brings me up. I get energized. And I was in a rut where I was not fulfilling my orca type, if you will. You know, I am an extrovert. I need that input, right? I need that challenge. I need that rush. And so I stopped playing video games and started an Uber business. I became an Uber driver. And the first night I went out to be an Uber driver, I literally helped someone who was completely annihilated from being at a bar with her friends on a Tuesday night and got her home safe. And I said, okay, this is fulfilling to me. I am still serving my community. I'm just doing it not in a first responder road. Unfortunately, I've had to do a couple of first responder things while I was an Uber driver, but that's another story. I could write a book with all the Uber stories. But so, yeah. Oh, yeah. New Year's Eve that one year was a very, very interesting night. That's when I actually had to kind of put my first responder stuff into motion with one of my passengers. Yeah, they would have. Yeah, I won't go into the story because it's kind of gross. But I literally, his friends that were with him were like, "How did you know how to do that?" And I'm like, "Just do this, you know, and call 911, and if he gets any worse, and bye-bye." I'm not going to be... So, but yeah, it's one of those things where, to go back to your original question, you know, it's a little bit of understanding and humility, and understanding that no one's perfect. no one expects you to be perfect. If you feel that they expect you to be perfect, they're the problem, not you, because no one in the world is a perfect individual. It's just not possible. So accepting your flaws, changing the flaws you don't like, and pivoting and finding a way to change those flaws is part of the journey. And if I can share one thing for people to dive into is one of my mentors, when in the middle of some of that struggle, one of my mentors, saw something going on, like, hey, you're not yourself. What's going on? And kind of shared a little bit, not deep stuff about it. But she says, something? She goes, I want you to do something for me. And it's not something you can do and it's fixed overnight. This is like a commitment to the rest of your life. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, okay, I'm all ears. I'm like, this is interesting. And she goes, I really want you to work on your emotional intelligence. When people have more emotional intelligence, they understand themselves better. They understand relationships better, whether that's work or private. And I'm not saying that I'm not, I'm nowhere near to perfect, but my emotional intelligence now compared to even 10 years ago is so much better. Do I still make mistakes? Heck yeah. I had a conversation this morning with my wife about the ice that was on the roads. She was like, there's so much ice out there. I'm like, honey, I just drove home from work. There is no ice out there. Like, everything is fine. No, the back porch was really, really ice and slippery. I'm like, yeah, because it's a porch and there's wind underneath it and it freezes faster than the roads. And she's like, oh, yeah. But that would have been a much different conversation, many years ago when I didn't know how to help, like, take her anxieties and bring them down to an understandable level. And that's all due to diving in deep on what emotional intelligence is. And it's not just one thing. There's many things that help you have more emotional intelligence.
100%. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I was curious early on with the problem solving, and I was hoping to find a way to see your thoughts on, what that means when you, again, that kind of sometimes male mindset. And you are, we are built differently. And that's the fun in recognizing it, recognize that no
Right.
human is perfect, and recognizing that men and women are different in how we
Venus and Mars are two different places.
Literally. And that's a great book. I don't know if you've ever read it, but
I've not read that one, but I've done the love languages and all that kind of stuff. So.
That's a great one, because it's that kind of thing of men want to go back to their caves, and just fix problems, and where women want to share their problems. And then it's you share that with a man, and man just goes into, well, I need to fix it mode, without maybe always recognizing, hang on now a minute, there's maybe a bit of upset or like that bit of stress or something too. And then that's where a clash can happen. And sorry, you were going to jump in.
No, well, it's you. So it's funny you say that, because in my world, everything is opposite.
Okay.
My wife is the introvert, keeping her feelings to herself. I wear my feelings on my sleeve. So there's still there is the Venus and Mars, but our world is a little bit different, at least, for me personally. And that's one thing that emotional intelligence helps you learn, is when you really start diving deep into that, you may realize that the typical, like what you said, like men they don't like to talk about their feelings. Dude, I'll share my feelings every day, all day. I don't care, because I want to be as real as possible. And it's not wrong to not share your feelings until it is weighing on your marriage or your relationships or your how you raise your kids. Like, if you're not willing to share your feelings with your kids, we got to talk about something. Like, you've got to at least, we got to raise these children. We've got to share with them when we love them, and share with them when we're not happy with them, and explain to them why we're not happy to them, and not just ridicule them or shame them. So it's one of those things where with my relationship with my wife, it is almost completely opposite. There's a book out there that we were asked to dive into when we were going through our marital issues, and it's called Love and Respect. And in general, women need love and men need respect. And that is true when it comes to any of us. I still need a little love and respect, and she needs love and respect. But when we both took that concept and put it into our brains and started looking at our relationship with that lens, everything got different. everything changed because we both understood that each person needed a little bit of both. And when a woman, especially as headstrong as she was and as independent as she is, she needs respect just as much as she needs love. And I, as a man, at the core, need respect. But I'm also an emotional being more so than some people, and I need love. So it's like, but when we understood that concept, the crazy cycle went away. And what the crazy cycle is explained in that book, is when, okay, I'm not showing you love because you're not showing me respect. So you're not going to show me love because I'm not showing you respect. And it's a crazy cycle, and it's a downward spiral.
I know exactly what you mean. Because I've been there.
Yeah, when people understand that concept and they can adopt that concept and put it into their daily lives, everything changed. Everything changed.
I love that, Kyle. And I'm just thinking here of like any friends listening in Ireland who, you know, it's still so new. Like talking is still quite like a new idea that, oh, you can like communicate anything to do with like either mental health or your emotions or, you know, things that are happening, all that kind of thing. And particularly for men. And I've seen both sides of that coin, you know, and if you kind of had one core message either to a younger version of yourself or to someone who maybe has never at any age that hasn't learned the things you've learned and experienced through your work, through your marriage, through your own mental health and through your service and life as a whole, I suppose, is there any kind of one thing you would love to have heard or been born knowing, or that you would love for someone else to know?
Yeah, that's another great question, because there's so much that, you know, I was just having a conversation with one of my lifelong friends the other day who lives in Washington, D.C., and the tragedies that happened there. In the last week, we've been a little bit more communication than we have in the last few months. And he mentioned something along the lines of the classic story. If I knew what I knew now, if I knew then what I know now, wow, how much better could I have been now? But I can't. I don't want to dwell myself on that, because the things that I've learned through my path of life of 52 years, I know, but but it's every single step of the way was something that made me who I am today. So it's hard to say just one thing. I mean, I guess if there's one thing, it's that humility. Have the humility to understand that you're not perfect, that you can learn something new, and if you're stuck in a rut, that's just a season of life. And instead of saying, oh, woe me, say, what is this moment in my life teaching me? What am I going to learn from this struggle? You know darn well this message from Tony and Jean. Embrace the struggle. So when you're in a deep struggle and you have good emotional intelligence and you're humble, you can look at this and say, hey, listen, I'm in a really bad place right now. What is the universe trying to teach me? What is my inner child trying to teach me? Like, who is screaming on the inside of me to say, hey, you need to fucking get your shit together? Pardon my French. And that's probably that humility, along with emotional intelligence and being able to be flawed and accept it and not have to worry about what people think of you. I don't care what people think of me. Maybe in the moment, I don't want to be thought of as a bad guy. But if someone doesn't like me, it's like, okay, well, what vibe did I give off that made them not like me? And it could be just as simple that I'm so outgoing. Well, that's not my problem. That's their problem. And okay, now I know that I won't be as outgoing around that person. There are certain people I work with that I do not share my real self with them because I'm too much for them. And that's okay. And as soon as and that's everything feeds back to that. That sounds like a very humble statement, right? So it feeds all the way back to that humility. If you can understand humility and grasp it, things change drastically. So probably humility is probably the number one thing.
That's a great number one.
Like dive deep on humility and what it means to embrace it.
And that's a fun thing to think about as well, Kyle, what you said with like the people you work with that you know you can't be yourself around. Like that's a fun thing in even bringing that awareness of, because I had that, like I was maybe too old in a way, but it took me to the age of 22 to kind of realize those moments where I was getting like excited or silly again, and I went to stop myself because I was like, oh, because I'd gotten so used to that around certain people that then I was like, oh no, I'm allowed to have that part of me, but maybe just not in this situation. Or
when it makes someone uncomfortable,
yeah,
maybe you just kind of bring it down a little bit. Yeah, like I don't want to I ultimately want people to accept me. I don't want people to, I walk into a room and they go, oh geez, he's here again. And doesn't mean that I'm not friends with people like this anymore, because I am, but I get phone calls from people and I go, oh, do I really want to take this? Are they an energy sucker or an energy giver? Do I have the energy for this at this moment in my time of my day? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. When I do get the energy back, I call them back, but yeah, so, it doesn't mean that you can't be yourself. And that's not the message like, hey, you need to change who you are in the moment. You just, to have that humility to understand that your personality may make someone uncomfortable, and to understand that for them. So the last thing I would ever want to do is make someone have anxiety because of me. Like that would feel really bad. So when I think of it that way, I'm like, okay, if I'm giving this person anxiety, because of my personality, maybe I just tone it back a little bit and maybe find out more about them, and so they're more comfortable around me. And then they can, because almost everybody is goofy and quirky in their own, when they're in their element, in their right, the people they feel safe with. People can be, goofy and fun, but maybe they're not ready for that yet with you because they don't know you, and that may be their personality. And so sometimes you just have to kind of, understand that, and that all goes back to that emotional intelligence concept.
There's such wisdom there, Kyle, and I'd love to kind of close on what's next. Now that you have all that growth and all that experience, and whether it's work or otherwise, like what's next? What would you love to yield and grow from all that?
Yeah, what's next for me is with the vast experience I've had in the healthcare field, my own mental health struggles, my ability to come through that and be in a better place, my background in education, and I'm not a formal teacher like you, but I've always been an educator in all of my jobs. I was kind of like the one that said, hey, we've got a new employee, Kyle, can you show him the ropes, And so any hospital I've ever worked at, I remember doing a travel position in respiratory, and they got a new hire that they said, hey, Kyle, can you train them? I'm like, I'd only been working there for like a month, and they're like, hey, can you train them? Because of whatever they saw in me, they were like, okay, he can show this person the ropes. So, probably what's next for me is I definitely want to be a public speaker. That fills me and what my personality. It takes all of the experience I've had and gives it a stage to share with younger generations and have people think of things differently. Podcasting, I don't think I'm never going to not podcast. It has been an amazing thing, not only for my new business of podcasting, of podcast production. It's been an amazing business growth and something I can do in my retirement, which is coming up in the next 8 years, where, okay, I do want to get to the point where I don't want to climb in and out of a truck and lift patients. As you get older, that's just more and more hard for your body, but I still want to serve people. So I have the same attitude, and like you said before, and you can attest to it, and that, serving you to help you in your business is the same concept of helping that lady yesterday who couldn't breathe. So it's not life or death, but it could be. You have a lot of stress. You're starting a new business. You quit a job. You're trying to make money to make ends meet. And there's things that I can do that help you, and I'm serving you. And that's how I approach every single one of my clients. Wherever they're at, I try to meet them and do what I can in the moment for them, and in the and help them with their goals, help them with what they want to do. Even sometimes even say, hey, have you thought about this in your business? And doing lead generation through podcasting by going out and finding people to bring into your world to get to know them. And now you have a relationship, and people buy from people who they like, know, and trust. And in that meantime, the people that do, like you, what's the word I'm looking for? You put your confidence in me to help you. And we were complete strangers when we met. Then we met and we got to know each other. And you liked me, you started to know me, and now you trust me. And we've been really good, working. You've been a working client with me. I've taught you the production side of things so you can kind of scale things so you know what I'm doing and all that. And that's November, that's only been 3 months? I mean, I feel like I've known you for a year. I mean, and now I've got an ally in Ireland. When I come to Ireland, I got somebody to show me around, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Certain. So in all that next step and phase of growth, and for friends listening, again, exactly as Kyle said, the stress has been mighty for the last couple of months. Every time I think that it's leveling out, there's a new problem. And, for anyone who does own a business or is growing in any way, shape or form, you know what that's like in, breaking through that threshold of control and solving the boings, the new problems that they keep showing up. So, in our show notes for checking out Kyle and working with Kyle, whether it's a business or whether a podcast is something that you just want to play and toy with and, have some fun with as well. Because I know some friends that we originally had a whole other podcast idea, so, there's sometimes podcast means something different for everybody. And Kyle, as I say, in getting things launched and keeping things going is and has been invaluable. So I know in your next steps, Kyle, in knowing that the podcast is there for you. And I love to hear that in, thinking about ways that you can serve even past that point of where your physical and emotional energies do start to deplete. We are all human at the end of the day. And I think for anyone listening who is maybe at that point of life of how can I do a little bit more? Kyle, like you've given such value and insight today for that thought, of like, well, why is something happening with work? Why is something happening with my marriage? Why am I feeling this way and am I in this funk? You've really just shared examples there of how you dug deep and continue to dig deep and learn. And I think that's the bottom line. I think particularly for anyone who does listen to us here, is we want to learn, and thinking of me is all about that concept of, well, where can I go and to a new level here? And I'm really excited for seeing where that growth keeps happening for you and keeping learning from you and with you. And
well, I'm excited to learn from you because you're getting ready to do something next week, and I haven't done it yet with what we're recording on right here with Riverside. And so we had a little introductory call yesterday, and it was really cool to kind of come in as the producer and see how that could work. And so you're teaching me some things, or you're helping me learn some things through you wanting to push your business and push your comfort level. So my clients that I work with, it's not always me teaching them. Sometimes it's them teaching me stuff that I need to learn to provide more value to people and to future clients. And so the relationship I feel and the working relationship that you and I have built over the last 3 months, I want to thank you for being as goofy as you are, that I've known you, and as goofy as I am. I love that. I feel like I can be myself around you. I feel that you can be yourself around me, and you share with me struggles that you're having, and then that makes me think, okay, that could help her with that, or oh, I've got someone that I can introduce her to that could help her with that. So it goes both ways. I'm learning as much from my clients as I have for them. So, and that's the partnership, that's the collaboration that podcasts can do for you.
100%. So Kyle, as we close your episode of season 2, Action and Exploring, I'm wondering, after exploring some of your next step thoughts and your growth process, What do you think of an action step that we could plan and create an event where you are the lead speaker? How would that sound?
That would be amazing.
Close of your episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I would 100% want to do that, where I could be a keynote speaker. That's exactly where I want to be. By the time I retire, I want to be a keynote speaker for mental health for the first responder. I want to be a keynote speaker for certain specific things inside of the medical world, like pediatric CPAP, in the emergency setting, CPR, and the new concept of why we do the CPR we do now and why it's different than what we learned 10 years ago. So those kind of things, plus learning all the stuff I am with business and podcasting. Now I have a keynote speak that I can do for podcasting for your business and why it's so important and how it can help grow your business. I mean, I could turn this on you right now. And in the last 3 months, how many people have you met that have actually helped you grow your business?
Oh, I could, however number of episodes we're on now, plus another like 15 easily on top of that. Just from podcasting.
Aren't even on the episode yet.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So the county episodes plus another 15 at least, of people you've connected and all that kind of thing. 100%. And it's in getting around those communities, and for anyone listening who, hasn't yet and is just kind of like listening, it's getting around the community, so 100%, Kyle.
Yeah. You are who you are from the top 5 people you surround yourself with. And that can change on a weekly, monthly basis when you podcast, because you can find and meet people by one simple question. Can you come on my top podcast to talk about blank?
And that helps you feel that this keeps the growth. It keeps the growth for both involved.
Exactly.
For definite. Kyle, you said it. And friends, you've heard it. We'll see Kyle again in the future at one of our upcoming events. You can check out the show notes for getting in contact with Kyle and for keeping in touch with Thinking of Me. And Kyle, again, I'm just so grateful for everything up to now and to come, and for all those nuggets, like huge golden nuggets there today in sharing for others. Thanks again for coming on.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, Lauren.
Thanks, friend, for listening to the Thinking of Me podcast. I hope you found something within our story today that lands for you. You can keep up with us on Thinking of Me blog, Thinking of Me Coaching, and Lauren Jean on socials. Go to thinkingofmecoaching.com/checklist for your checklist for self-fulfillment. Until our next chat, talk soon, my friend.